Would you mind opening
Of
us
course,
with prayer?
I'd be delighted to, but it's the prayer of the season in which we can all join. Christ is risen from the dead, trampling down death by death, and to those in the tombs bestowing life. Christ is risen.
Truly, the Lord is risen.
He's risen.
Truly is risen.
Your Eminence, I'll start with introductions if that's okay.
Please.
So it's a blessing, it's a blessing to have, make sure I'm unmuted. Yes, it's a blessing to have everybody join us this evening. We have people from all throughout the metropolis and from various jurisdictions and from various places throughout the country. So we're very grateful for all those who have joined us tonight. We welcome you. This is part of a webinar series that's being sponsored by the Religious Education Commission of the Metropolis of Pittsburgh with the blessing of His Eminence Metropolitan Savas. And for those who don't know, my name is Father Demetrius Sokoris. I'm a priest in the Metropolis of Pittsburgh, and I'm a member of the Religious Education Commission. We're excited. This is essentially the second lecture in this webinar series. It's a religious education initiative with a renewed focus. You've probably heard from me a number of times now and from us, a consistent messaging where we're trying to discuss the cultivating of the fundamentals of the Christian life, let's say. And those for our focus, they include a cultivating of the love of the Lord's Day, the love of worship, the love of Scripture, which we're going to hear more about tonight, the love of prayer, and the love of service to others. So this is the second lecture in the series this year that we're offering, and hopefully it will only be one aspect of our religious education initiative, where we're again trying to be overtly offering this messaging of cultivating the fundamentals of the Christian life. At our first session in March, we had Father Stephen Freeman speak with us on the mystery of the Sabbath, as he titled it, the cultivating the love of the Lord's Day, and it was an excellent way to begin the webinar series. And we're blessed tonight to have another Father Stephen with us. Father Stephen DeYoung is going to be speaking with us tonight on cultivating the love of Scripture. And before I give a little background, a little bio for Father Stephen as people are entering into the Zoom conference, let me quickly orient everyone. We ask you all to, if you can, please, when you come in, make sure your microphones are muted. I'm sure everybody's familiar with Zoom conferencing by now, but we just try to give a helpful reminder to mute your microphones when you come in and try to keep them muted throughout. We do encourage you, don't be shy in asking questions. You can submit your questions in the chat room, but just so you know that the questions are only going to be seen by the host of the meeting. But we really don't shy away from asking questions. Your questions enrich the dialogue, and we welcome them. We want to hear your questions. The way that this is set up today is Father Stephen is prepared for roughly a 50 to 60 minute presentation lecture, and then it's our hope that we'll have a good 30 minutes for Q&A. So when your questions are submitted, we'll kind of categorize them, and then we'll call on you to ask your questions. So with that orientation in mind, let me give you a little background on Father Stephen. Father Stephen holds a Master of Divinity from Westminster Theological Seminary. He also has a Master of Arts from the University of Balamand and a PhD in Biblical Studies from Amherst University. Father Stephen was ordained to the Holy Priesthood in 2009 by His Grace Bishop Thomas, and he served as priest in Charleston, West Virginia, West Virginia, and for 8 years. For 8 years at St. George Orthodox Cathedral there in Charleston, before he was assigned as priest at the Archangel Gabriel Orthodox Church in Lafayette, Louisiana in 2017, and this is where Father Stephen is currently. Father Stephen, many of you know, is the host of a popular podcast called The Whole Counsel of God, which is offered through Ancient Faith Ministries, and it takes the listener verse by verse through the Scripture. This is essentially Father Stephen's Bible study. Again, very well received by many people. And he's also the author of the associated Whole Counsel blog. Father also co-hosts the podcast called the Lord of Spirits with Father Andrew Stephen Damick. And they've been doing that for about a year and a half or so, is my understanding. And the two focus on discussion of, as they say, the union of the seen and the unseen. And this podcast, too, has gained substantial interest. Recently, Father Stephen had what I found to be a very interesting conversation with a well-known Orthodox iconographer and wood carver, Jonathan Pageau, which can be found on YouTube, and I think many people would find interesting. And then I would say last but not least, I'm sure many people have heard by now that Father Stephen has a new book that's out, and it came out in April. It's called The Religion of the Apostles, Orthodox Christianity in the First Century. And so Father Stephen is clearly very active as a religious educator, as a priest and as a religious educator. And he's asked to speak in many forums. And so we're very grateful that he's, been willing to offer his time and his efforts and his insight with us today. And I guess with that introduction, I guess I would just ask, Father, how are you holding up? You getting enough sleep with all the work you're doing?
Yeah, I actually don't sleep very much.
Okay.
I sleep maybe 5 or 6 hours a night. That's part of the trick, I guess, to getting all this stuff done. But I want to thank Your Eminence and for inviting me. I want to thank my brother clergy who are here and my brothers and sisters in Christ who are here for coming to hear me ramble on for a while, and then hopefully be able to answer your questions in a way that's at least convincing. Yeah, so I'll go ahead and get started, unless there are any more preliminary anything we need to go over.
Please, Father. Thank you.
So I'm talking about tonight, as was already said, cultivating a love of the scriptures. And I don't come to that topic with the assumption that anyone I'm talking to doesn't love the scriptures, right? But despite loving the scriptures and being interested in the scriptures, it can be very daunting to try to find a way into the scriptures oftentimes, and especially as I know I'm talking to clergy and religious educators, that becomes doubly daunting when you're going to have to now try to teach someone else and try to, as I'm going to do in an hour or so, answer questions, and you don't know what those questions are going to be. And so part of what I want to do tonight is give some sort of entry points. And so some of the things I'm going to say may sound rudimentary or base level. Some of you may be well past some of the things I'm going to be talking about. But if that's the case, then hopefully it will still be helpful to you in terms of communicating these same things to the people who you're teaching, who maybe aren't as far along as you are. Because it's those first steps that I think are really most important, of beginning to open and get into the scriptures. I think most people, once they find a way in the first place, once they get involved, I think their love for the scriptures and their interest and their curiosity and their desire to know more will sort of snowball as it goes. So it's getting that first inertia going, of getting from, I don't really look at the Bible because it's confusing and I don't know what to do with it, or I'm afraid to try to teach this to somebody because they're going to ask me questions and I'm not going to know all the answers. Getting past that, I think, is most of the battle. And the good news is you don't have to get the world's most expensive wallpaper, those degrees that Father just mentioned, that I went and got because I'm a Bible nerd. You don't have to do all that in order to learn from and appreciate and teach the scriptures. I did that in a lot of ways so that other people wouldn't have to. So hopefully I can pass on some of what I've spent all that nerd time reading in ancient dead languages and stuff to you normal folks, so that you can hopefully put it to use, put it to practice. So in getting into that, I think pretty much any modern Christian you ask will tell you that they at least have some kind of guilt, maybe even pathological guilt, about the fact that they should be reading the Bible more than they do. Regardless of whether they're doing a little or none, we kind of feel like I really should be in the scriptures more than I am. I really should be spending more time there than I am. I think the same is probably true for everyone for prayer, but I'll leave that to the speaker on prayer. So I'll just deal with the scriptures. And so, people have various reasons why they don't. They'll say, I don't have time. I don't know how. I don't know where to start. I don't know how to get in there. A lot of people I know, including me as a kid, you sit down and you say, well, I'm just going to read the Bible. I'm just going to read the whole thing. We approach it the way we'd approach another book, a modern book. I'm going to sit down. I'm going to start Genesis 1 verse 1. I'm going to read straight through. And usually, if you're really dedicated, you get about halfway through Exodus. And the reason you get about halfway through Exodus is when you get into the middle of Exodus, you kind of get into the weeds. You start getting, well, when you build the Ark of the Covenant, it shall be so many cubits wide and so many cubits high, and the poles shall be so many cubits long. And you will use this goat hair to make the the panels of the tabernacle and all. And you try to push through. And then when you get into the last third of Exodus, all of that is repeated again exactly the same while it describes them then actually building it. So you have God giving them all the instructions, and then you have the narrative of them following all of those exact same instructions. And so a lot of people tap out right there. If they don't, they may make it into Leviticus, and then when you start hearing about what you're supposed to do with the different entrails of the goat you're sacrificing, then people punch out there. But it's rare that on that kind of pass, especially on the first or second attempt, that you get much farther than that. And then people just sort of pack it in and just say, this is a bunch of weird stuff. I'm not going to make it through it. Forget it. Right. And there's not really a large percentage in muscling through. Right. Because when you're muscling through, you get to some genealogies, you get to some of those instructions for building things, and you just kind of try and muscle through it, but you're not getting anything out of it. That's why it seems so sort of tedious and painful, because you're just sort of scanning your eyes across the page so you can say you did. And that the Bible isn't sort of magic, right? So just sort of staring at the page or passing your eyes across it isn't going to somehow make you a more spiritually fulfilled or moral person or help you come to know Christ better. It's about quality, not quantity, right? So where do you start? One of the first questions I get asked almost all the time, somebody may have already queued this up for the Q&A, but I'll head you off at the pass, is what Bible should I get to read? Right? Some folks have them sitting around their house. And what's sitting around your house could be almost anything. It could be King James Version, very common if you have an older Bible that's been in your family for a couple generations in English. RSV is another older one. You might have some of the newer ones. And for the most part, I'm about to qualify this heavily, right? But for the most part, this isn't really something folks should be worried about first. Now, I say for the most part because there are some exceptions. So for example, if you have the Living Bible, right? The Living Bible was something that came out in the 1960s. It was very popular. It's not really a translation of the Bible. It's a paraphrase of the Bible. They wanted to make it easy for people to read. And the problem is they valued easy to read over theology a little bit. So for example, in Philippians 2 of the Living Bible, it says that Jesus came in the disguise of a man. This is kind of bad theology, right? So if you have a Living Bible, right, that one doesn't count. There's one called The Message that came out more recently, like in the 90s. It's a similar kind of thing where it's sort of paraphrased, right, to try and be quote unquote modern English. And a lot of those, as they age, get really, really cringy because they were trying to use sort of hip lingo of a previous generation. And it just becomes more and more awful, like as time goes by. But your sort of main translations, your King James Version, New King James Version, the RSV, the Revised Standard Version, the New Revised Standard Version, even like the NIV, which I'm not a big fan of, but even that, the English Standard Version, which is basically a revision of the Revised Standard Version. It's a very small revision. It's 96% identical to the Revised Standard Version. Any of those kind of just sort of mainstream English Bible translations are okay to start. Now you're going to say in the Old Testament, yes, they don't have all the books that are in our Orthodox Old Testament canon, right? But there's 39 of them there that are in our Old Testament canon that you may not have read, right? So we can start by reading those 39. And then once we've got those down, we can move on to the 7 or 8 others, right? that we may want to add in too. And that actually illustrates an important principle, which is we need to make sure that we don't make it all or nothing when we approach the scriptures, right? And when we try to teach the scriptures, we can have this idea that either I need to sort of get a comprehensive grasp of this or it's not worth it, right? So making a beginning, learning a little, when some of my brother priests have asked me for advice, because I've had this Bible study running for 11 years, have asked me for advice on, how do you get started in a Bible study? What I tell them is to do a Bible study that is wildly successful in your parish. All you have to do, if it's a weekly Bible study, is you need to learn one new thing about the Bible a week. That's all you have to do, just one thing. And then if you communicate that one thing, right, to the people in the Bible study, they will learn one thing, right? That way. And over the course of a year, everyone will learn 52 new things about the Bible. And those things will kind of snowball, right? They'll build, right? But you only need just one thing at a time. And in terms of our overall theme tonight, when people start learning those things, when people start making connections, they get excited. They actually do. And it's not just nerds like me that get excited about learning things, but it's normal people too. Everybody, when they learn new things, when they see things for themselves, when they start making connections themselves, they get excited about it and they want more, right? And as you're doing it, as the person who's teaching, as you make those connections, the same thing will happen to you. You'll start getting excited about it, and then you'll want to learn more and you'll have more to pass on, and it will just snowball and continue. So in terms of beginning to read, it's important, and folks can note this down. The best place to start, and this is both in terms of reading for yourself if you're not real familiar with what's in the scriptures, or in terms of when you're talking to people who you're teaching, where to start in teaching and where to advise people to start when they come and ask you, hey, I know I should be reading the Bible now more, where should I start? It's always good, right? It is always good to follow obviously the reading schedule that the church has given us. If you follow that every day and just do the daily readings, you will read the whole New Testament minus the book of Revelation, which is probably good, right? That folks aren't getting into that unattended. But you'll read the whole New Testament other than the book of Revelation every year. So that by itself is a great place to start. But in terms of the Old Testament, where you might want to know. The best place to start is with the narrative sections, where it's telling stories, right? Because even if your Bible study is just you telling the stories to the people in the Bible study, right? The stories in the scriptures especially are there because just about anyone can find a way in and to connect to it, right? And find something to get. Again, it's not all or nothing. You may not plumb the depths, right, of the story and exhaust everything that could possibly be said about it, but getting something out of it. So the book of Genesis is narrative. The first half of the book of Exodus, First and Second Samuel, and the story of David is something that people connect with. And you can continue to go sort of deeper and deeper as you go. And then when you get into First and Second Samuel or First and Second Kingdoms, if you're using like the Orthodox Study Bible, they use the Greek names for the books, whereas other English Bibles use some of them, like Deuteronomy, but not all of them. And then Third and Fourth Kingdoms or First and Second Kings, also especially the stories of Elijah and Elisha. These are things that people will engage with very quickly. Additionally, if people are looking, especially if they're wanting to incorporate more scripture into their daily prayers and their prayer life, the Psalms are excellent, because again, the Psalms are a mile deep in terms of theology, but they also have, even to somebody just reading them in English with no background whatsoever, there are all of these places where you can connect. And especially people who are going through trials and difficulties in their life, the Psalms can be very powerful, because a lot of times, one of the problems we have in our prayer lives, I know I'm encroaching a little bit past scripture, but is that we get a little too pious. And what I mean by that is that we have these feelings that may be directed toward God, or just our life or the world. And we think, well, I'm angry, or I'm upset, or I'm doubting, or I don't understand this. And it's impious. It's wrong if I say that. It's wrong if I admit that. But a lot of the Psalms are about praising God, but a lot of the Psalms are about, God, what's going on? You know, how long am I going to suffer? And these wicked people who don't care about you are going to prosper. You know, how long, when are you going to come and help me? Right? What does this all mean? And so reading that and praying that is a way that people can get those feelings, right, and those thoughts out of themselves in a way that is completely Christian and completely pious, right? Because it's the words of Scripture. And so the Psalms, while they could be a little difficult to teach because you're teaching poetry, right? But they could be very, very useful in terms of reading them privately in the context of prayer, in that context. Things that are difficult to read, right? Especially read first, right? Things that need a little more context and need a little more teaching are things like Leviticus, Numbers, First and Second Chronicles have a lot of long genealogies. Joshua and Judges will disturb a lot of people. I'm not saying we should talk about them ever, but these aren't the things you tell people to read first. Right? You don't want their first. Maybe if it's a teenage boy, Judges might be a good place to go first, because they want all the sex and violence, you know, that'll titillate them and get them to think the Bible's cool. But for the most part, right, those are they need more context, right? They need to be really taught in a contextual way that makes sense of the things that are going on in those books. The book of Proverbs is actually really difficult to teach. You wouldn't necessarily think so, right? Because it's page after page of sort of one-liners. and they're not necessarily arranged in any particular order where there's some theme being developed or anything. They're just sort of individual bon mots, sort of dropped out there. When I went through it in my parish Bible study, at the beginning of each Bible study session, we played a game called Shakespeare, Ben Franklin, or Proverbs, where I would write a quote from Shakespeare, a quote from Ben Franklin in Poor Richard's Almanac, and a quote from the book of Proverbs on the board, and have people try to guess which was which. And I did the Proverbs quote from the King James, so it sounded a lot like Shakespeare, right? Just to help throw everybody off a little more. And it was difficult sometimes to tell which. So if you just sort of drop that on somebody, hey, read through the book of Proverbs, they're not going to have a good time, right? That's something that needs to be, again, contextualized in terms of what's going on. So that's kind of a beginners versus non-beginners. Of course, the book of Revelation in the New Testament, you can turn on TBN someday and see what happens if you just run wild with that. So that's another one that needs a lot of context. Basically, to understand the book of Revelation, I won't go too far down this rabbit trail, but to understand the book of Revelation, you have to spend a lot of time studying the Old Testament prophets, and especially the weird ones like Zechariah and Zephaniah and the visions they're having and the strange things they're saying, because all of those symbols are then picked up in the book of Revelation. So if you go to the book of Revelation cold, you can go all over the place. You've got helicopters and Russian and Chinese armies and all kinds of things. So that's another one that is down the road a piece. That's sort of that's not the freshman class, that's the senior class. So in terms of reading and understanding the scriptures when we're doing it, and whether you're doing it yourself, whether you're teaching someone how to do it for themselves, or whether you're just teaching the scriptures to someone, I think there's really sort of 3 steps or 3 layers or 3 levels in terms of how to do that. Or at least I've broken it down into 3 because 3 seems like a very orthodox number to have it, structured around. And so the first one is literally reading the text. It's what does the text say, right? That may sound kind of rudimentary, but it's an important step. And this can be intruded on by a whole bunch of things. You think, well, I just read the words and that tells me, what it says, what the text says. But there are a number of issues that can come out of this. One of this is that sometimes certain biblical phrases, especially in their King James translation, have sort of become popular sayings. They're sort of phrases we know, we might not even realize they're from the Bible, right? This is another thing with Proverbs, Shakespeare, and Ben Franklin, right? We have a bunch of these things rattling around in our head. We don't know where they originated. And sometimes the version we have in our head is not actually what's in the Bible. So I'll give you an example. How many of you are familiar with the verse in Isaiah that talks about the lion lying down with the lamb? Since everybody's muted, you could put up a hand. Okay. There is no verse in Isaiah that talks about a lion lying down with a lamb. The book of Isaiah talks about a lamb lying down with a wolf. So people had the other version so firmly in their head that you could look this up on the internet if you're bored at some point. There's literally a conspiracy theory that someone went and changed all the Bibles to say wolf. Right? Because people are so certain that it said lion at some point. Right? They're so certain. But it didn't. And so we can have ideas and interpretations about what the Bible says set in our heads. And then when we go and are reading the actual scriptures, instead of reading what's there, we're plugging in what we quote unquote know is there, right, already. And when we do that, right, we're going to end up throwing ourselves off, right? So this is an important first step. And so that means reading a little more slowly than we normally do. Right? We can't sit down and read the Bible the way we read a newspaper or a magazine or a novel, right? We've got to take a little more time with it. Make sure we're reading it correctly. Stop a little more often and think about it than we normally do, right? Especially when it seems simple. A lot of times when we're reading those narrative passages and those stories, we fall into that kind of just reading it like a novel, and then we don't notice the details. All of the little important bits that might become meaningful to us, we just pass over very quickly, just to sort of follow the narrative and get to the end. An additional issue is that the vast majority of us, now I realize there are probably some people here who are fluent enough in ancient Greek that they can read the Greek Old Testament and the Greek New Testament in the original. So there probably are some folks here who could do that. But at least most of the people who are teaching about the Bible can't do that, right? Can't, they might be able to hash their way through it. I know they're taught that ancient Greek in Greece, but most Greek people who I know, even who grew up in Greece, sort of admit to me that they kind of lean on the modern Greek translation when they're actually reading. And so that means there's sort of this step between us, right? Between us and sort of what the text says. But most of the, if not all of the English translations I already mentioned will help you with that. They will have, even if you're not using a study Bible, they'll have footnotes, right? And a place. And it's important that this is another thing when we're scanning over and reading through, you'll get to a place, there'll be a little A, B, C, right? Superscript, real easy to scan past that. But if you jump down to the footnote, it'll say, usually lit, L-I-T, right? Meaning literally. And it'll tell you, okay, here's what the word actually means. That didn't seem to make sense for us, right? So we changed it a little, right, to help make sense of context. But you can see what it literally is. Or it'll say GK for Greek, or it'll say HEB for Hebrew, or SYR for Syriac, right? It'll tell you down there, this version, right? So if you're reading, for example, the King James Version, their Old Testament is based on the Hebrew. But most King James Bibles you get will have footnotes that will say, GK period, Greek, and tell you what the Greek text has there. But that requires us to slow down and check out those footnotes, right? And see those things. And a lot of the time, that'll be a good opportunity for us when we slow down and notice those things, to sort of think about whatever that sentence just was that we were just reading, right? Why did they not put what it literally said, right? Or how is it different if we look at what the Greek has than what the Hebrew has, right? And start to think a little bit. That can give us a path, and even if we don't know any at all of whatever the other language is, that can give us a sort of a way in to start to look at those things. It's also important if you're teaching, right? If you're just starting to read yourself, right? Get yourself a good translation and go with it, right? When you get to the point where you're teaching, it's important that if you're using English translations, to get a couple. And this is super easy now, right? It used to be, you'd have to get 3 or 4 physical Bibles and like set them all out and, find the same verse and go back and forth. Now you could go to a place like Bible Gateway that's free, BibleGateway.com or BibleHub.com. You could put in a verse like on Bible Gateway and pull up 8 different versions. You could pull it up in all different languages, including the original, right? You can just pull them all up side by side and just look at them, right? And so any place where you want to know more, you need to know more, that's a very easy way to do it. Again, even if you've only got English to work with, right? If you see the 2 or 3 different ways that people rendered that sentence, right, that can give you a way, oh, okay, conceptually, right, that'll clarify a lot of things that just reading one translation won't necessarily. So that's the first step, is just reading, just figuring out what does the text say. The second step is interpreting, and that's what does the text mean, right? So it says this, what does that mean, right? And the whole key to interpretation, 100% of interpretation, is context. Right? Now, there's different levels of context. We're going to talk about different contexts, plural, here now. But all of interpretation revolves around context. So the very first level of context, and this is something that's important, even if you're just, I'm at the entry level, I'm just going to read the daily scripture readings that the church has given me from the New Testament. We're used to hearing, for example, the Gospels in these pieces, right? We attend the Divine Liturgy and we hear a piece, right? We hear, it's called, the fancy word for that is a pericope, right? We hear this piece. Or when we go and do the reading for that day, it's a piece of the text, right? And so we get the piece, but a lot of the time we don't get sort of the bigger picture. And what I mean by that is the book as a whole. Now, on Thursday night of Holy Week, we get a whole lot, right, of the Gospels. But even then, especially that first reading, which is, like 5 or 6 chapters from the Gospel of John, it's so much that it's kind of like trying to take a drink out of the fire hose, right? It sort of blasts past you. And if you're like me, every year you pick up a few things that you didn't the last couple of years. Each year there are a few things that pop out that are significant, but it's so much at once. But it could be helpful to, for example, when you're doing your daily readings from St. Matthew's Gospel, is to sit down one day. You can do it in an afternoon. Average person, average reading level could do it in an afternoon. Sit down and read the Gospel of Matthew from beginning to end. Right? And then when you're doing your daily readings, you're reading that piece each day, you'll have an idea of where that piece fits into the whole story that St. Matthew is telling of the life of Christ, right? You'll know what just came before it. You'll know what's going to be coming next, right? And you'll start to see how it fits, right? How it fits into Christ's life. You'll see things like the opposition from the Pharisees and the Judean people building, right? And you'll see Christ becoming more and more explicit about his identity and his mission and about the cross. You'll see these things develop. So that could be helpful, getting that whole picture. And you could do that with each of the Gospels. You could sit down with the Gospel of John after Pascha. You could sit down with St. Luke's Gospel after the Lucan jump. St. Mark's Gospel is the shortest one. It's only 16 chapters. So you could do that in an afternoon. But any of those books, if you read it beginning to end like that, it will help you when you then read the parts to give you the picture. You got to have, this is something that's called the hermeneutical circle in philosophy. You have to understand the whole to understand the parts, but you have to understand all the parts to understand the whole. Right? And so it forms this circle. Well, you can't really break the circle, but you could try and get an idea of both. So our daily readings and the way we read scripture in the divine services helps us with the parts. It gives us the parts. And so if we on our own then pick up the whole, those two can balance each other out. So that's sort of the first level of context. This piece that I just read in the context of the book it's in, the writing that it's in, right? Because the scriptures aren't really a book, right? We have it in the form of a book, at least at home. In our churches, it's not one big book, right? We have it separated, but the scriptures aren't a book. The scriptures are a library, right? It's a library of books that was composed over the course of about 1500, 1600 years. And that came together and developed and was edited and brought together. It was brought together in pieces and then into bigger, right? So the book of Psalms is made up of 5 smaller collections of Psalms, right? And they get brought together and brought together. It was the Bible today. And so, as you can imagine, if you walked into a library and took a book off the shelf and flipped to a page and read 5 pages and then put it back and then went to another book and grabbed it and read 5 pages, right? You need to have each of the whole books, right? And so then the next step is, okay, now that I'm more familiar with some of these whole books, now I need to get familiar with how they fit into this section of the library, right? This category or this section of the library, right? These are all science books. How does what I read in this book relate to what I read in this other book, right? Here that are in the same section, dealing with some of the same ideas and the same topics. And most English Bibles you get will help you with this. They will help you with this. Often it's in a middle column. In most standard English Bibles, there are 2 columns of text. If it's a study Bible, then you have the big footnote section at the bottom, but otherwise you just have the 2 columns. And then there's sort of this middle margin, right, that runs down between the 2. And in that middle margin, there are all of these verse references. There'll be sort of a pile of verse references. If you're in the New Testament, they're usually Old Testament references. So you'll be in St. Matthew's Gospel. You'll be reading, and next to a verse in St. Matthew's Gospel, it'll say, you know, Exodus 32, verse 18, Psalm 13, verse 2, right? It'll just have this list of verses. And it's sort of this weird cryptic marginal notation that a lot of times we don't pay attention to. But what those are is that someone has very helpfully for us sort of gathered verses in the Old Testament that are in some way connected to the verse we just read. And this then becomes an easy way, again, if you only know English, to start to make some of those connections. Now, sometimes you'll look those up and you'll be like, wow, those are really connected, right? Like, yes, clearly what I just read when Christ is speaking in St. Matthew's Gospel, he's referring to this in the book of Genesis. Other times you'll look it up and you'll be kind of like, you know, maybe not, right? That's okay. You just ignore that one, right? You just ignore that one if it's a stretch, right? But what they're doing is they're trying to give you sort of an overabundance, right? Here's everything we could find that we thought might be connected, right? And then let you decide what you think really is and really isn't, right? But so this is now another step we could take, just as English Bible readers, to start making those connections. And when you start making those, when you're teaching the scriptures, this is one of those things I was mentioning that starts to get people excited, right? When they start to see how these things relate to each other. This is something that people will really key in on. And the same is true once we go beyond the context of the Bible. One of the things that is very effective at getting people interested and in cultivating their love for the scriptures, specific to our Orthodox Church, is finding the places where scriptures are referenced or quoted or used in our liturgical services. When you point these out to people, they get really excited, right? Because now not only do they feel like, oh, now I understand this thing in the Bible, but they're like, now I understand this thing I've been singing, or this thing I've been hearing, or this thing I've been saying every week since I was 3, right? And all of a sudden, you know, it applies this kind, and they make those connections again, right? And that can also help us a lot. This is part of how the church has preserved our theology for us. This is part of how, because by the way and the time and the service in which these things are quoted, these scriptures are quoted, that could tell us how the church has understood that scripture, what the church has thought that scripture is about or connected to. So one example I've used several times. So if you've listened to my stuff, especially if you listened to the Lord of Spirits Pascha episode, you've already heard me talk about this. But one of the big examples for me of this is, I believe, as I'm about to give this example, I believe the Greek Archdiocese does this too. That the knocking on the door at Pascha, at the rush service. No. Okay, well, I'll trust your evidence. You know.
Some priests may do it, but that's not what they're.
Oh, it's not part of your, okay.
Yeah.
Well, in the Antiochian tradition, we actually enact the psalm of knocking on the door, who is this King of glory, right? The Lord mighty in battle. That psalm is actually talking about part of the Baal epic, part of the story that Baal worshipers told about Baal. And even though that story about Baal was buried in the dirt from about 1200 BC until the 1960s, the way it was used in at least parts of the Orthodox Church preserved this idea that this is about Christ banging on the gates of hate, knocking down the gates of Hades and invading. Sort of Baal becomes the devil in a lot of the Old Testament, right? And invading. And so until the 1960s, when Ras Shamra, that was the ancient city of Ugarit, was sort of dug out of the ground, people looked at the Orthodox Church doing that or interpreting the psalm that way just in general, and they said, oh, well, that's allegory. Right? That's this allegorical interpretation. It's not really about that, right? They're just applying it to that. But it turned out that what had actually happened is that meaning had been preserved through in a liturgical way, right? In a liturgical way, it had been preserved, and there's 1,000 more examples of that. The way the Song of the Sea is used on Holy Saturday, and the three youths in the furnace on Holy Saturday, where the way it's been understood by the church is preserved in where it's referenced. And so this is, for us as Orthodox Christians, another layer of context, right, that we have built in. And it's a context in which the people we're teaching and we ourselves hear and sing and recite the scriptures, that can give us a window into, here's what it means, right? Here's what it means, because here's how it connects to everything else. So once we've done that, once we've sort of moved through those layers of context, then the third and final step is applying the text. Right. Okay. So that's what this is. We have what the text says. We have what we believe it means. Now we get to, so what? Right. So what do I need to do about this, if anything? Right. Is this just, for the nerds? Right. Okay. That's interesting. Yeah. Ugarit, city in Syria. Okay. Whatever. Tablet. Right. Or is this actually something that means I now need to go do something differently when I go to work tomorrow, right? Or when I go to the Divine Liturgy on Sunday, do I need to conduct myself differently, or do something differently, or think about something differently? Then what does this text have to do with that in any way, right? And not being able to do this last part is actually sometimes the biggest obstacle for people in terms of developing a habit of Bible reading. Because even if they get kind of interested and excited about learning things, that only goes so far, right? If the rubber never hits the road, right? If this doesn't actually do something, right? Do something. And you could go too far in the other direction. You can see this in the churches of some of our Protestant friends, for example, where the Bible just sort of becomes this how-to manual, right? And homilies and sermons just become, here's how to be successful in life, God's keys to success, right? Like, here's your, 5 ways to have a better marriage, right? And that's all, right? That's all it's about, is just, here's some tips, here's some pro tips for living life as a Christian. And so, you get the problem of people pulling out, little pieces of scripture and just throwing them at each other, quoting them at each other completely out of context. All that, obviously, we want to avoid. But at the same time, St. James warns us in James 1, 23 and 24, that what you don't want to be is the person who hears the scriptures and then doesn't do them, right? St. James compares that to somebody who looks in the mirror and then walks away not remembering what they look like, right? My more modern example would be when you look at your watch and then realize you still don't know what time it is because you weren't paying attention, right? You just glance at what? Oh. So we don't want that, right? Because then, no matter how interesting we thought the scriptures were, it hasn't been worthwhile. And St. James is really picking up on something that his brother used to say a lot, right? Christ talked a lot about hearers of the word and doers, right? So when you just look at a text, even once we've done the interpreting and found the connections I was talking about, there are a lot of ways, right, you could try and apply it. Good ways and bad ways. There was sort of a running joke when I was in seminary about how you could quote and apply the Bible using ellipses, right? ... Right? Like you could say, Judas went and hanged himself, ... Go and do likewise, right? Like you could sort of twist things around and make them do whatever you want. And so this is a caution too, in terms of application. Sometimes we come to the scriptures with the idea that here's what I want to do. Here's what I want to be okay. I'm going to go and find verses that I could use to make it sound like it's okay, right? We come to the scriptures with a result we want, right? And what we're doing when we do that is we're basically coming to God, we're coming to Christ and saying, here's what I'd like you to tell me, Lord. And if you tell me to do this, I will do it because this is what I want to do. And that obviously is an inversion of the relationship, right? If Christ is our Lord, if he's our master, he's telling us what to do, right? And if we're serving him, by definition, a servant doesn't get to choose what he does, right? A servant does what the master tells him, whether he's fond of it or not. We talked about, in terms of interpretation, in terms of understanding what the text means, we have these contexts, right? So if I read a passage and I say, well, this means X, right? And then I go and I look at the context. I read the rest of the book and I say, well, if that verse means X, then this passage makes no sense, right? Well, then I'm wrong, right? Back to the drawing board, right? Or if I say, well, I think in this book, St. Paul or St. Matthew or whichever author is teaching X, and then I look at the other books in the library and they all say Y, I'm like, okay, well, I guess I was wrong, right? So it's tempered in that way. And one of the great things that tempers our attempts to apply the scriptures in a practical way is our holy tradition. Right? It sort of serves as the context, right? Because we have before us, right? Christianity was around for close to 2,000 years before I was around. And the people of Israel, God's people, were around for another couple thousand years before that. So I'm not coming to this fresh. I don't get to choose my own adventure, right? I don't get to sort of decide what the Christian life looks like for myself. We have examples, this isn't just at the level of interpretation, we tend to, at least the discussions I have, because I talk about the Bible all the time, right? People will look at the fathers, they'll read the fathers, even like St. John Chrysostom, who is what we have from him is pretty much homilies, right? Mostly homilies that are preached to normal people who showed up at his church. We still try to read them in a sort of technical way, and we just get into these arguments about, well, St. John says this verse means this, right? So that's what it means, and if you say something different, we get into these sort of scholastic arguments about it. But what the fathers are doing almost all the time is not just sort of abstractly interpreting the scriptures. They're not a bunch of nerds sitting around having philosophical discussions, right, about the scriptures. Everything that they talk about the scriptures is always very practical and applied, and they're talking about it for a reason, right? Even when St. Gregory the Theologian is getting into the details of the doctrine of the Trinity, he's doing it because someone is teaching something that threatens people's salvation. In a very practical way, it threatens them living the Christian way of life in this world. It threatens them coming to know Christ. And so he needs to clarify something that may seem obscure, but he needs to clarify it to make sure that people stay on the right track, to make sure that the Christ who people are coming to know is the actual Christ who exists and not a figment of their imagination, right? It's not the Christ they want to exist, but the true Christ who really exists, who is the God who created the universe. And so we see before us, even in saints who never wrote a thing on paper, who just lived their lives, and whose lives we now have, right? We see how what is contained in the scriptures is lived out. We have thousands of examples of people who have had the same experience of God that the authors of the scriptures had, and that they wrote down in the scriptures, right? But they've had them too, and that experience has shaped their life. So if I read the scriptures and I decide just to take a rather mundane example, right? I don't see anything in here about gambling, right? I can't find a verse. You can't show me a verse that says don't gamble, right? And I could find some verses where people cast lots, right? I could find some things like that. That's kind of like gambling, right? So I think gambling's fine, right? I think I should be able to go and bet all of my family's money on the ponies, right? And that's fine, right? That's fine. Well, then I've got hundreds of people through the history of the church who speak otherwise, and who will go to the scriptures and explain from the scriptures why that's not what the scriptures are teaching, right? That they're not giving me permission, right, to do with my money whatever I want. And that's a mundane example, but there are all kinds of other examples. And so our best help when we're teaching the scriptures in terms of finding where the rubber meets the road is looking at how the fathers, and especially homilies from the fathers, looking at how they applied it, and looking at the lives of saints and how they lived, and using those as our examples of how these things were put into practice or should be put into practice. And again, this is going a little outside my mandate here to talk about the Bible, but let me say, this is just a hobby horse I've been riding lately, because and this is from pastoral experience. The majority of the Orthodox spiritual literature that we have available to us in English is monastic literature. By happenstance, by whatever, right? That's just sort of the case. A lot of our people who want to draw closer to Christ, who want to go deeper in our tradition, are reading that monastic literature. That's not bad in and of itself, but a lot of them don't know how to apply it. And so they read St. John Climacus's Ladder of Divine Ascent. And if you've read it, in his introduction, St. John says, I don't tell married people to do any of this. I tell married people to, and he says what he tells married people. And then the rest of the work is instruction to monks. And it's not that that can't be applied to people, but you need a teacher there to then say, okay, here's how you would apply this element of the monastic way of life in your married life. There has to be a bridge there. And there often isn't. But I'm not doing this to sort of beat up on that, but rather to say, I think we need to encourage our people to read more homilies from the fathers. Because the homilies not only help interpret scripture, right, and apply scripture in this way, but also, again, the fathers were preaching these to normal people. The fathers were preaching these to just average, I mean, these were tradesmen, these were slaves, these were, married men and women and children. That's who they're talking to. And St. John Chrysostom's are sometimes hysterical because he didn't write his homilies out himself. Someone took notes. And so there will be asides in there, him yelling at people for pushing and shoving in the communion line, him talking about sort of weird superstitions the people had, and why they're silly, they're very real and very human. And so they not only help in this aspect of applying the scriptures, but I think if we encourage more of that, it would be helpful to our people in terms of them being able to apply what's in there a little more directly without sort of the help and the explanation, to their lives. Because it's a little more, it's the same wisdom from the same fathers, but directed sort of directly at them, a little more than some of the monastic literature that they can have difficulty understanding and applying. So that's those three steps, and that's sort of my presentation proper, right? In terms of how to make a beginning ourselves, how to help others make a beginning in getting into the scriptures. I know for some of you that was probably kind of basic, but when we're teaching others, we have to start with, even if we're beyond it, when we're teaching others, we have to start with basic. And get past that first, as I said at the beginning, that little bit of inertia to get the ball rolling, and let things start to hopefully snowball, go beyond that.
Thank you, Father Stephen. Thank you so much. Glory to God. We have some time. Your Eminence, would you like to offer some comments and thoughts before we open up for questions?
Thank you. Father Stephen, I'm very grateful. I'm very grateful for your approach. I'm very grateful that you started with basics. Basics are always good. And that you addressed real difficulties, how the desire to start can often be frustrated by the reality of initial contact with scripture, and how scripture can be confusing and off-putting. I'm glad that you front-loaded that, and that you gave us ways to come in. And again, I'm grateful that the stories, reading along with the church in the church's own time. But I just want to, if you don't mind, I want to say one thing about that, and that is, I think we all, I get excited every year at Pascha that we're, here we are, we set the reset button again. We're starting with John, we're starting with Acts, and then within a matter of sometimes just a couple of days, we're off the rails, because the Gospels have been an important saint or a commemoration has suppressed or displaced the gospel reading of the day. And so you will have been reading a narrative that is meant to take a week, that accumulates in detail and has, as it were, a punchline. And then, and that's especially true in the epistles, when you're reading some delicate argument that Paul is making in Romans, and then it happens to coincide with an apostle. So you get the same reading that you get for every apostle, and you get a little frustrated, So I almost I want people to be aware of that too, that that they can, if they choose to, stick with the reading of the day. And it might be disloyal for me to do this, but I would direct them to the OCA website, which gives them the options. I mean, it tells them, if a number of things happen to load up on a particular day, they'll just give you all the things, all the scripture readings. And you can see for yourself which one you've been reading and carry along with that, and which one is peculiar to that day. I just think that for that, I don't want that to be another excuse. Was like, I tried, but it's just too jagged, you know. Yeah, and I also think you should also stress. I mean, I'm glad that you put the Psalms in, not so much as something that needs to be studied initially, but just something that needs to be engaged with, so that people can see that God has given them a way of being themselves in his presence, so that they can articulate frustration and doubt and things like that, so that they don't have to pretend to be. I'm grateful that you kind of pointed out the kind of false piety of, putting on your Sunday best when engaging with scripture, and imagining that you can't be honest, So that's all good, and I'm grateful. That's all.
Thank you, Your Eminence. And I think that's good advice. Yeah, the Russians for us will list all the epistle readings for us on a given day, and list all of the gospel readings. So yeah, that's helpful.
And one of those things you talked about, how if you learn one thing a week, then you've learned 52 things in the course of a year. Learning a technical term, a Greek term, a week. I mean, not that I want to, but it would be good to know that in the beginning was the word, that for instance, that Greek words are polyvalent. I mean, that you've got a word like logos, and that it has a rich history, and that to translate it in, just to say this in English is to shave off so much, or to squeeze it into a small space when it really needs a lot more breathing room. So I know that that's what people do in Bible studies, is they open up the word, but it's nice to have, to pick up just a little, a little Greek is a good thing, logos, pneuma, apostolos, breaking down the words so that that the words themselves are rich vessels of communication.
Yeah, and something that can help with that, that I usually recommend, if you want to go sort of next level, right, but you're still mostly working in English. There's a Bible, you can get it online for free, called the NET, like the Net Bible, the New English Translation. You can get, because it's the translators are from the Society of Biblical Literature, and they did it and put it out public domain. But that public domain means you could get it free online. You could get pretty cheap print copies because they don't have to pay any fees to use the translation. And if you get that and get the full notes edition, make sure it's the full notes edition. Those notes are pretty much translation notes. So if you want to go kind of next level, but still working in English, it takes each verse and breaks down, here's what the original words are, here's why we translated them the way they did, here's kind of the range of meaning of some of these words. So that could be a way in to go a little deeper, like His Eminence was just talking about, if you're working primarily in English.
And one last thing before I let other people participate. Pace yourself and don't be greedy. Don't think you have to exhaust it, in a year. I mean, you're going to do multiple laps here. I mean, those of us who read scripture for our life, as it were, are constantly being surprised by connections and I mean, every time I read the Acts of the Apostles, I said, did I read this before? I mean, where'd that come from? And whenever I read a commentary, I think, oh my gosh, why didn't I see that before? Like, I have to say, let me just put a little plug-in for this. I mean, in the early pages, but I'm thinking, oh my gosh, this seems so obvious. That you point out, for instance, that we don't hear about Pharisees and Sadducees and the divisions among the Jews in the Old Testament, but by the time, because there's a gap between the writing of those books and then the writing of the Gospels. But when we come to the Gospels, they're just a fact on the ground. There are Pharisees, there are Sadducees, and nobody's telling us what it's just accepted that these are the players, and if you're there, you know what this is about. Well, that just it was kind of in our face that there is no one kind of Judaism, that there was a variety of Judaisms at the time, and that what we now kind of want to read back into the New Testament scene is a much later creation, and that creation, that concept of Judaism, was developed as a reaction to Christianity. So here I am, 64 years old, and that hit me with the force of revelation, as it were, and has freed me up to read things differently and more clearly, critically too. I mean, there are things I would like to talk to you about privately, but I'm not going to buy everything. Although I haven't come across anything yet that I don't. But I'm just, I'm grateful for. What I mean to say is that, this is a lifetime relationship. That's all, and that you just don't think that it's fast food. It's not. It's food for life, and it will sustain you, but it will open up to you in time. And to the degree that you apply yourself to it.
Yeah.
So that's all. Now the other people.
That's definitely true for me. Like, getting my PhD is when I realized how little I know about it. I tell people, some people find it's a great consternation to people, because every once in a while somebody will come up, and because there's years of my parish Bible study verse by verse online, and somebody will come up and say, well, back in this Bible study you said this, and then now more recently you said this, you contradicted yourself. And my response is always like, well, I was wrong before.
Yes.
Like, I may still be wrong now. I don't think so, but I might be. And but I was definitely wrong then. So
I know that in the form of an attribution to Mahatma Gandhi, where people were trying to catch him, and a reporter said, Mahatma, you said the opposite yesterday. He says, well, today I know better.
yeah.
So yeah, and really, life, a lifetime is just not long enough to learn it all. Just this past week, again, I said I wasn't going to stop, but just this past week, Roman history just fell into place for me. And I just thought, wow, how did I get to be this old and not know that this preceded that, and this is why that, but you just have to be hungry, and keep at it. And nowadays, as you pointed out, the resources it's at your fingertips. We don't have to go to those to academic libraries and find the book that someone's checked out, and learn how to use all those, concordances and whatever. It's there. And even now you say the sermons of the fathers. Yeah, well, just St. John Chrysostom on 1 Corinthians, whatever, just pull it up and read it. Oh, I don't like that translation. Well, there's another one. So I mean, we really have we have no excuse, really. And I can't read it. I spend too much time driving. Listen.
Yeah.
So okay, go ahead, Father.
Thank you.
Thank you, Your Eminence. And Father, you used the word basic and a number of times. I would say this has been extremely practical and practically inspiring, and so I'm very grateful for that. And I think we have another maybe 15 minutes or so to open it up to questions. Zachariah, I haven't been checking the chat room if people submitted questions, and if not, we could just ask people if they'd like to offer their questions.
We do have a couple questions.
Okay, we could ask the person. Maybe we can ask the person to ask the question.
I will. So there's a double question, and maybe Trudy Elmore, could you ask your question? Somebody else asked a similar thing, so maybe we could start with that. Trudy.
Sure, my pleasure. Thank you for everything that everybody has said, especially Metropolitan Savas. It's actually encouraging to me to know that you have aha moments, and I do too, and I'm grateful for that. Father Stephen, your work has been transformative for me, especially your book, and I'm eternally grateful. I come from a Protestant background, although I've been Orthodox for 16 years, which isn't really long at all. I'm finding I know nothing. The more I learn, the less I know. Where do we find a source for the homilies that you mentioned that we should read? Coming from a Protestant background, I have a long love affair with the scriptures, and would like to take it to a deeper level. And which particular one do you recommend beginning with?
Yeah, I mean, easily accessible. They're available for free online, and almost every parish I've ever been to in their parish library has the old. Philip Schaff was the editor, the Church Fathers set. Sort of the first set are the ante-Nicene, the fathers before the Council of Nicaea. Those are kind of red. They have red on the spine usually. And then there's a green set and a blue set. And in the green set are a huge swath of St. John Chrysostom's homilies, especially on the epistles of St. Paul, but some others also. And those are, like I said, those are free online. If you go to CCEL, which is the abbreviation for Christian Classics Ethereal Library. They called it that back when they first put it online, .org, ccel.org. Those are all available there free. As I said, your parish library is likely to have a set of those in hard copy that you could borrow from there. If your parish has a library, they've probably got a set of those. It's sort of the basic starter kit for a parish library in the Orthodox Church. And that's a very good place to start. And St. John Chrysostom's style, if you're coming from a Protestant background, doesn't seem weird. Right? He's not doing what a lot of times, and I have my qualms about it really being this, but what's called allegorical method and this kind of thing. He doesn't do a lot of that, right? It's very sort of straightforward. It's the kind of homily you're used to hearing. His are very long by Orthodox standards, but not necessarily by Protestant standards, depending on what kind of background you're from. But I think that's a good place to start. And then there are lots of others now in English, but those are sort of the quickest and easiest to lay hands on to get started.
Thank you. I appreciate your input, and keep up the good work.
Thank you.
There also is a website called New Advent, which is, they're easier of access. It's a Catholic site, I think,
Okay.
but it has an easy access to Chrysostom and Ambrose and Jerome and several others.
Newadvent.org. Yeah.
CCEL. Pardon me?
That was betraying my Dutch Michigan roots, was CCEL. That was it.
Father Theodore Petrides, you had a couple questions. Do you want to ask one or a few of those?
Sure. Thank you, Zacharias. And Father Stephen, I just want to thank you and reiterate what's already been said. I really have benefited in my ministry a great deal from your podcasts, and I look forward to when every book of Holy Scripture is finally available to hear your commentary on. I know you're methodically going through things, and there's more on your website, but and Your Eminence, many years as always. I appreciate your insight into his presentation, so helpful. I'll just start with the first question that I posted. Father, the Orthodox Study Bible, it's been out for quite a while now, and do you think that there's a need to revise it at this point? There were some real parameters that just needed to be met and followed, and I don't want to say anything disparaging about the first version, but inconsistencies in footnotes, improvements in translation, accuracy of some of the study aids. And if you do think that the Orthodox Study Bible could really be improved upon, how would you recommend we go about this as the Church in America, or perhaps as the English-speaking Orthodox around the world?
Yeah. So I'm not on the ancient faith payroll, unlike my friend Father Andrew, so I could speak freely. And the Orthodox Study Bible is not bad. I still recommend people get it and use it. So the things I'm about to say that are going to sound critical are within that overarching. It is a good thing, right? It is worth having for Orthodox Christians. So yeah, there are odd issues here and there. There's a verse in Genesis that's just missing, and I've been in touch with people involved in the translation and marketing of it, and they don't know why. One of them, the way I know about it is one of them actually asked me why. They're like, "Do you know why this verse isn't in here?" I'm like, "I don't know why that verse isn't in here." But
They put it over there, just kind of.
Yeah, I went and got the Hebrew. I got the Greek. I'm like, it's there. So
This happened all the time, right? Human error in getting.
Yeah. I mean, it's just somebody made a mistake. Yeah. And yeah, the footnotes. There are some books where you'll go pages with no footnotes, and other books with very comprehensive footnotes. There's some weird translations. My favorite weird translation being the donkey centaurs in the book of Isaiah. I played Dungeons and Dragons a lot as a kid, and I never saw a donkey centaur. But I actually did research and found out how that happened. But and it's kind of obscure and weird. It's actually talking about a particular short version. It's talking about a particular demonic spirit. So like St. Jerome translated it as Lamia in the Latin, which is a type of sort of female demon. But one of the Hebrew titles is the donkey rider. She was depicted riding on a donkey. And so that's what they tried to convey in the Greek, was donkey rider, in reference to this. And St. Jerome still understood who that was referring to, so translated it Lamia. But the translators of the Orthodox Study Bible just took the Greek very, very literally. It said donkey centaur. So yeah, so there's things like that where it's just sort of, it's uneven. Like the translation of, other than the missing verse in Genesis, the translation of the Torah and the notes on the Torah, the Pentateuch, are pretty solid in the Orthodox Study Bible. The translation of Isaiah is weird, like I just mentioned. There are places where they had to make choices, and so someone can agree or disagree with the choices they made. There are two substantively different versions of the Book of Judges in Greek. And so if you get like the New English translation of the Septuagint, it has both in parallel columns. In the Orthodox Study Bible, they chose one of the two and translated it. So that might be something that you might want to reconsider, whether you want to do two columns or just use footnotes to describe the differences, or how you want to do that. So there are a lot of areas where I'll say we could iterate and we could build on the work that's already been done. I don't think the work that's already been done needs to be scrapped. I think it needs to be honed and refined and added to more footnotes, more notes, right? Build on that as a foundation and iterate and maybe come out with a second edition. I will let you know that there are talks about this that are active at Ancient Faith and at the St. Athanasius Academy that has the rights to the Old Testament translation,
Right.
about how to iterate, how to take this to the next level. So that discussion is in process. It's not a process that's happening. It's not being iterated upon currently, but the need is being recognized and discussions are happening in terms of how to do that.
Okay.
So
Thank you. That's helpful. Your Eminence.
Well, I wanted to just mention that there is this one that has come out recently. I don't know who these people are, but and great. The disadvantage to this is that there are no notes of any kind. But when I read it against the Greek, and it's just the Old Testament, when I read it against the Greek, I realize it errs on the side of, it's pretty close. I mean, it's very close, even to on the side of awkward. So it does call you up from time to time. You say, really? Wow. That's what the Greek says. But one that I do want to ask you about, I've gotten a lot of use recently out of this, the Jewish annotated New Testament, where each book of the New Testament is presented by a different Jewish scholar who does a long intro and lots of notes. And because the Jews are starting to engage with the New Testament, in recent times, because as we kind of alluded to, it's the only source of information. It's the best source of information between, for 2 or 3 centuries. And the whole functioning of the Sanhedrin and its composition and what kind of cases it would have engaged with, we don't have there's nowhere a clearer picture than in the New Testament. So it's been a scandal that they haven't looked at it more for themselves and see what they can learn about Judaism in that period. So there's a lot of good stuff there. Again, when you come at it from an angle that you're not used to, you catch different details. So whether or not you know it or use it, it's just one of the things I found very helpful recently.
Yeah. Well, first, the Lexham English Septuagint that you held up first. Lexham is the physical publishing arm of the Faith Life, who does the Logos Bible software.
Okay.
So that's who that is, who did that. And that is, when people ask me about a translation of the Greek Old Testament, I say probably the most readable one is the Orthodox Study Bible. Probably the most solid one is that one.
Yeah.
And the New English translation of the Septuagint is basically for people who know Greek, right? But who want to sort of quick reference things in English, If you don't know Greek well, the New English translation of the Septuagint is not for you. In terms of the Jewish annotated New Testament, that is really helpful. And a lot of what recent Jewish scholars are writing about the New Testament is very, very helpful. Just we have to always keep in mind, right, that the rabbinic things are later.
Mm-hmm.
And so we can't just take it all over whole cloth. But yeah, within that, I think Daniel Boyarin was one of the people involved in Jewish annotated New Testament.
Daniel. Yes. Yeah.
He in particular, what he writes, he has an article. It's kind of a scholarly article, so it's a little heady for folks, right? But called The Gospel of the Memra.
Okay.
That is based on a course he taught at Harvard on the prologue to the Gospel of John from a Jewish perspective, from a first century perspective. And he deals with some of that also in a book he wrote called Borderlines, which is looking at the separation of Judaism and Christianity. I think these are the bibliography of my book.
Yeah, I saw that. Yeah.
From a
By the
Jewish
way, I don't know-
perspective, which is interesting because he makes Saint Justin Martyr sort of the villain of the piece because he's Jewish, right? but
don't
from
know
our
if you
perspective, he's sort of the hero.
I don't know if you know Father George Parsenius of Yale Divinity, not Yale. He graduated from Yale, but teaches New Testament at Princeton Theological Seminary. He was just named the new dean of
Yeah.
theology, and also the professor of New Testament studies for Hellenic College, for Holy Cross. And his background is in the Gospel of John and the farewell discourse as a symposium, and it's a really interesting and good thesis. And his number one exegete, he can't love him more, is St. John Chrysostom. And the reason he chose to go to Holy Cross and sever his relationship, which is actually a much cushier arrangement to be at Yale. But the fact that he's decided to is because he wants to be able to teach Chrysostom on Paul without people rolling their eyes and, thinking, what does this 4th century bishop have to tell me? We have more sophisticated hermeneutics now. So he just wants he wants to be able to be in a place where people love Chrysostom, and will accept, will receive him in the proper spirit. So just wanted to, if you don't know him, I think you should hook up. He's a good guy.
Yeah, I'm familiar with him by distance, but I don't know him personally.
Okay.
Father Stephen, we have just a few more. If we do have a few more people who had a question, would you indulge us with a few more minutes? Is that okay?
Sure.
Zechariah, would you mind? Yeah.
The Bobbers had a great question, kind of on a different theme.
Hi, Father. Thank you for taking time to speak to us tonight. Our question is, what do you recommend for the memorization of scripture?
Okay. Talk about the benefit of memorization. What do you memorize and how do you memorize?
Yeah. Memorization is kind of a lost art in the modern world. When you read about ancient people, they did these feats of memorization that seem sort of impossible to us. Like St. Paul, in his rabbinical training, would have literally memorized the Torah in Hebrew, been able to recite the whole thing from memory. That just seems like mind-bogglingly impossible to us. So, I mean, our Baptist friends have kept Awana alive. I, at one point, dallied with getting in touch with them and trying to make an Orthodox version of Awana. They weren't interested. But I think memorization is important because, especially now when we live in an era where I've got, the sum of all the world's knowledge in my pocket on a little device all the time, that encourages us to not actually know anything. Because we could just reference anything at our fingertips. We feel like we don't have to know it. But the things rattling around in my phone don't help me in my daily decision-making in life, right? They don't infuse any kind of love or virtue into my life by my phone being in my pocket. And so even though I hypothetically constantly have access to them, I don't really have them, right? I don't have a hold of them. So this is why memorization is important. Getting started, if you aren't used to memorizing things. I mean, even 50 years ago at school, people would memorize poems. Kids would be memorizing poems and memorizing different pieces of things and, monologues from Shakespeare and huge chunks of the Bible. And we're just not used to doing it anymore. And so you have to kind of start small. Here our Baptist friends are helpful because there are lots of little Bible memorization aids like flashcards and that kind of thing, where you could start with just a few verses at a time, right? And especially if you get one of the New Testament ones, we have the same New Testament. It's probably the King James Version. you know, right? It's a good place to start. My dad always used to say that kids should always use the King James Version, because then when they get to Shakespeare, they'll be able to read it. But it's also just beautiful language if you like the English language. But starting small like that, and then challenging yourself. Now this was when I was a kid in our Protestant church, but we had a small group of the women in the church who were sort of retired and older. Their kids were out of the house. And so they decided, we're going to spend a summer, we're going to memorize the whole book of Philippians. It's 4 chapters. So it's not that long, but that's a pretty unwieldy thing if you're not used to memorizing things. But those kind of things are possible even for us modern people, you know, if you set your mind to it. And when you're trying to memorize something longer like that, you have to do it in chunks. You know, you have to memorize like a paragraph at a time and recite it and drill it, right? And say it out loud to someone. So if this is something you're doing as a family, right, you have to, you know, recite the things you're memorizing to each other. If you're all working on like a larger piece together, you know, maybe go around and each person recites, you know, now you do the next piece, now you do the next piece, you know, you do the next piece. And if you start small and if you're deliberate about it and you stick with it, you'll be surprised how much you can memorize. And it sticks around for a long time. I still have Luke 2 in the King James Version rattling around my head, because when we were kids, we memorized it every Christmas, so we could do the, you know, the Peanuts bit, you know, at the Christmas pageant. But I've still got the prologue to St. John's Gospel rattling around in my head. I've got from times where I memorized it. One thing that can help, and this is something that's built into the way we use scripture liturgically, is the reason why, starting with ancient Israel, the scriptures were chanted, is that something being set to any tune helps you memorize it. If you don't believe me, this is something that the dean of my Protestant seminary used to say to us. This was back in around 1998. He looked at us one day and he said, I bet you none of you can recite the Nicene Creed, but you all know the lyrics to at least 5 Britney Spears songs, right? Because you hear a song in the car, you know, it's in heavy rotation, you hear it about, before you know it, you know all the words. You weren't trying, you weren't, you know, it just, because of the music, it got in there. And so just intoning, right, or when you can help with, could be a real aid to memorization. You may have noticed that even in the liturgy, you may not have memorized a lot of the scripture readings, but you may know the words to a lot of the hymns, especially the ones that we sing very regularly, without sitting down and trying to memorize them, right? But because of the way music works with our brain, it got in there.
If I could say one last thing then, because we
Absolutely.
do have to close it. You know, memorization was part of, you know, as you know, in monastic canons and regulations, you had to have memorized. You know, a novice was somebody, the minimum requirement was that you memorize the book of Psalms. And, you know, a bishop is supposed to have memorized the New Testament. But if you're a novice and you go for a 3-year cycle of going to church to all the services, and the Psalms are part of every service, and some Psalms are pulled out for every day, like Lord, I have cried, or let everything that breathes praise the Lord, or have mercy on me, O God. You know, at the end of 3 years, you will have heard it 150 times, and it will become second nature, you know. And so just to say you have a novice should know the book of Psalms just means you have to be at church all the time and just hear it. You'll just soak it up, you know. So yeah, and you're right. And with I want to just give a little tribute to my predecessor, Metropolitan Maximus, who was a wonderful, great man and great theologian, and whose 6 months of his repose we just celebrate this week, or mark this week. He used to come periodically, the last 10 years of his life, he had some serious memory loss issues. And near the end, he just certainly didn't recognize me or anybody, and couldn't acknowledge with any meaningful way. But we'd bring him to the chapel here at the Metropolis a couple times a month on a Saturday and do a liturgy with him, and he would chant it, and he did, and one liturgy I did with him about 4 or 5 years ago, it was the Ascension, and there's one hymn that is only sung, after the consecration of the gifts for the Mother of God. It's specifically sung for that day. And he started singing the one that we always sing, Axion Steed, it is meet and right. And I turned around, I said, no, Your Eminence, it's the Ascension. And I gave him the first word and he chanted it, And this is somebody who didn't know who I was, but it was embedded because of the, it's two things. It's not just words, it's words and music, and it somehow gets a deeper hook, So that's why poetry is so much easier too, because you memorize the rhythm too. So
Yeah, the meters, yeah.
Anyhow, it is 8:45, and
Right.
I just want to express my, Father Dimitri he's the actual host, but I appreciated this, and I thank you.
Yes.
Well, thank
Very
you.
grateful. Thank
Thank
you,
you
Your
for
Eminence,
inviting
and thank
me.
you, Father Stephen. And I know there are probably a few other questions, but I have some of my own, and we won't. But the time has come, and I guess I would just say thank you, Father Stephen. Thank you, Your Eminence. One of the things I thought about, I guess, just in closing, is we titled this cultivating the love of XYZ, and in this case, the love of Scripture. And what does that look like to cultivate a love for anything? And I just, in the dialogue between the two of you, what I have taken away is a reminder that it requires intimacy and consistency and struggle, and it's not done in isolation. It's not done in isolation. And so this is inspiring for me, and I'm just very grateful, Father Stephen, that you accepted this invitation, and Your Eminence for blessing this in the conversation in general. So, Your Eminence, if would you please close us in prayer?
Sure, but again, P.S. Talking about what you've read is another way that helps you to remember it. And when you're in a community of people who are reading the same things, you can say, "Did you notice in today's scripture? Wasn't that weird?" Father Stephen, I know you mostly through the fact that when my chancellor gets to work in the morning, he will have listened to one of your teachings, and he will want to talk about it. So I get it through him, because that's just how, that's how it sticks. That's why people have book clubs, because talking about the thing gets you into it. Right. And then you retain it more. So, okay, we end as we began. Christ is risen from the dead, trampling down death by death, and to those in the tombs, he has given life. Christos anesti, Christ is risen, Christos voskres. What else? Almasih kam, le Christ est ressuscité. I'm out.
Truly, the
Truly
Lord
he's
is risen. Thank you, Your Eminence.
Thank you, Father Dimitri. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, everyone. Have a blessed night, everyone. Okay.
Thank you, Father Dimitri.